Dr. Benjamin Hayes designed the quantum equations that made the stellar gateway possible. But when the portal finally activated, his calculations revealed something that contradicted everything he thought he knew about rogue stars. The stellar object they had connected to wasn't wandering through space randomly as astronomy textbooks claimed. It was moving with purpose, following a precise trajectory that would bring it into our solar system in exactly 847 years. What made Hayes wake up screaming every night was the realization that their gateway hadn't just opened a connection to the rogue star, it had created a navigation beacon that was guiding something enormous directly toward Earth. Hayes's private research revealed the most terrifying truth of all. The rogue star wasn't a natural stellar formation but an artificial construct, a massive vessel disguised as cosmic phenomena. According to his quantum analysis, the star contained hollow regions large enough to house entire civilizations, and the energy signatures suggested those civilizations were still active after millions of years of interstellar travel. His final equation, scrawled on his office whiteboard just before his nervous breakdown, proved that the gateway hadn't just contacted an alien intelligence. It had given that intelligence the exact coordinates it needed to find and harvest every living thing in our solar system. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, when I still believed we were just pushing the boundaries of theoretical physics. My name is Dr. Thomas Blackwood, and 3 months ago I was the lead quantum physicist at the National Radio Astronomy Observatory in Greenbank, West Virginia. The Appalachian Mountains provided perfect radio silence for our deep space monitoring, but what we built there went far beyond passive observation. We created something that shouldn't have existed. A quantum tunnel capable of instantaneous communication across impossible distances. The project started innocuously enough. NASA had tasked us with developing better methods for communicating with deep space missions. Traditional radio signals took years to reach nearby systems, making real-time exploration impossible. Our quantum entanglement array promised to change that, creating paired particles that maintained connection regardless of distance. Hayes came to us from MIT with theories that made seasoned physicists question their sanity. While we focused on particle-to-particle communication, he proposed something far more ambitious: full matter transmission through folded spacetime. The man had a gift for making the impossible sound inevitable, sketching diagrams on napkins that would take our best computers hours to verify. I should have paid attention to the tremor in his hands when he presented the stellar gateway concept. Should have noticed how he avoided eye contact when explaining the minor modifications needed to our existing array. The bastard knew exactly what he was building, and he used our legitimate research as cover for something that violated every natural law I thought I understood. The morning everything went wrong, Hayes hadn't slept in 72 hours. His office reeked of stale cigarettes and something else. Ozone, like the air after lightning strikes. When I found him staring at equations that seemed to writhe on his whiteboard, he turned to me with eyes that had seen too much. "Tom," he whispered, "we need to shut it down, right fucking now." That was 6 hours before the gateway activated itself. Hayes grabbed my arm with fingers that felt like ice through my lab coat. His grip left bruises I'd discover later, purple fingerprints that matched the frequency readings on our quantum display. "Tom, listen to me," he hissed, pulling me toward the emergency shutdown panel. "The calculations are wrong. All of them. We're not connecting to empty space. There's something out there, and it's been waiting." The main laboratory stretched across 2,000 square feet of converted warehouse space, our quantum array positioned at the center like some metallic altar. 37 particle accelerators formed concentric circles around a crystalline core that hummed with barely contained energy. The setup had cost NASA $47 million and represented 3 years of round-the-clock construction. Hayes wanted to destroy it all with the flip of a switch. "Ben, you're exhausted," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Let's get you some rest, then we can review." "There's no time." He yanked open the shutdown panel, revealing a maze of color-coded switches. "The gateway's been receiving signals for the past 18 hours. Not random cosmic background radiation. Structured transmissions, mathematical sequences that respond to our quantum probes." Dr. James Holbrook chose that moment to enter the lab, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the break room. At 58, Holbrook had survived 3 government administrations and more funding cuts than anyone deserved. His pragmatic approach to theoretical physics had kept our department operational when flashier programs lost their backing. "Hayes, step away from the controls," Holbrook said calmly, setting down both cups. "Tom, what's the situation here?" "He thinks the gateway is dangerous," I explained. "Claims we're receiving alien signals." Holbrook studied Hayes with the patience of someone who'd talked countless researchers down from similar ledges. "Ben, show me the data. If there's genuine cause for concern, we'll contact Washington immediately." Hayes laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Washington? Those bureaucrats couldn't handle a parking violation, let alone first contact protocols." He gestured toward the main display, where wavelength patterns scrolled past in hypnotic cascades. "Look at the quantum resonance readings. They're not chaotic. They're organized, deliberate. Something out there is using our own signals to map our location." I moved closer to the display, studying the data streams. The patterns did appear unusually structured, but correlation wasn't causation. These could be natural phenomena, pulsar emissions, gravitational wave interference. "Natural?" Hayes interrupted. "Tom, I've isolated 43 distinct communication protocols embedded in what we thought was background static, each one more sophisticated than our most advanced encryption algorithms." The primary array suddenly shifted pitch, its harmonic resonance dropping by half an octave. All three of us turned toward the crystalline core as it began cycling through colors I'd never seen before. Not just shifting wavelengths, but hues that seemed to exist outside normal electromagnetic spectrum. "That's not supposed to happen," Holbrook muttered, pulling out his phone to record the phenomenon. "The crystal matrix is designed for single-frequency coherence." Hayes moved toward the shutdown panel again. "It's adapting to our technology, learning how our systems work." He reached for the master switch. "We have maybe 10 minutes before—" The lights died. Emergency power kicked in 3 seconds later, bathing the laboratory in hellish red illumination. But the quantum array hadn't lost power. If anything, it glowed brighter, drawing energy from sources our instruments couldn't measure. "Generator malfunction," Holbrook announced, though he sounded uncertain. "Tom, check the backup systems. Ben, don't touch anything until we understand what's happening." I jogged toward the electrical panel, my footsteps echoing strangely in the transformed space. The backup generators hummed outside, functioning perfectly according to their status displays. Power flowed to every system except our primary lighting grid, almost as if something had selectively disabled our normal illumination while leaving everything else operational. Behind me, Hayes was speaking rapidly into his phone. "Dr. Morrison, it's Ben Hayes at Greenbank. I need you to run an astronomical survey on coordinates I'm about to give you." "What do you mean you can't access the database? Since when?" The crystalline core pulsed once, twice, then emitted a sound like whale song mixed with digital static. Our quantum entanglement array was supposed to operate in perfect silence. The frequencies involved existed beyond human hearing range. "Holbrook," I called from the electrical panel, "we're drawing 17% more power than our maximum design capacity. The array is pulling energy from somewhere else." "Impossible," he replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "Run a full diagnostic on the quantum field generators." Hayes ended his call and turned toward us with an expression. "Morrison can't access any astronomical databases. Network connections are failing across the entire academic grid, but only for deep space observation data." The whale song grew louder. "That's our beacon," Hayes said quietly. "We've been transmitting our location for 18 hours, and something out there just confirmed receipt." He pointed at the crystalline core, now cycling through patterns that hurt to watch directly. "Congratulations, gentlemen. We've just announced to the universe that Earth is open for business." Holbrook lowered his phone, his face pale in the red emergency lighting. "Ben, even if you're right, shutting down now won't undo what's already been sent." "No," Hayes agreed, "but it might prevent us from giving them detailed schematics of our planet's defenses." He gestured toward the data streams, which were now flowing in reverse direction, not receiving information but transmitting it. "Because that's exactly what we're doing right now." The whale song stopped. In the sudden silence, we heard something that shouldn't have existed. Footsteps in the corridor outside, approaching our laboratory with measured, deliberate pace. The footsteps belonged to Director William Ashford, but that didn't make me feel any better. Ashford never visited the laboratory after hours. Hell, he rarely visited during business hours. The man preferred administrative meetings and budget reviews to actual science. "Gentlemen," he said, stepping into our red-lit workspace with the casual confidence of someone who owned the building. "I understand we're experiencing some technical difficulties." Holbrook straightened, automatically shifting into damage control mode. "Nothing we can't handle, Director. Minor power fluctuation affecting our lighting grid." Minor? Ashford's gaze swept across our quantum array, now humming with frequencies that made my fillings ache. "Tom, your array is drawing enough power to light half of Greenbank. Our electrical company called my personal cell phone 20 minutes ago." Hayes stepped forward, his lab coat wrinkled from 3 days of continuous wear. "Director, we need to evacuate the facility immediately. This project has compromised our planetary security." Ashford studied Hayes with the expression of someone evaluating a broken piece of equipment. "Dr. Hayes, you've been working without sleep for 72 hours. Perhaps you should—" "Listen to me," Hayes interrupted, his voice cracking with exhaustion. "The gateway isn't connecting to empty space. We've established contact with something that's been traveling toward Earth for millions of years. It's using our quantum tunnel to download detailed information about our planet." "Elaborate," Ashford said simply. I pulled up the transmission logs on my tablet, showing him the data streams that had been flowing outward for the past hour. "We're broadcasting terabytes of information through the quantum tunnel. Electromagnetic spectrum analyses, atmospheric composition readings, gravitational field measurements, essentially a comprehensive survey of Earth's defensive capabilities." Ashford examined the data with surprising technical literacy. Most administrators couldn't distinguish between gigabytes and gravitational waves, but he seemed to understand the implications immediately. "How much information have we transmitted?" "Enough," Hayes said bitterly, "to give them detailed blueprints of our solar system's layout, our planet's magnetic field strength, and the approximate population density of major metropolitan areas." The crystalline core pulsed brighter, its whale song returning with harmonic overtones that resonated through the laboratory's steel framework. But something had changed. The sound now carried rhythmic patterns that suggested language structure. "Is that communication?" Ashford asked. "Confirmation signals," Hayes replied. "They're acknowledging receipt of our data packages." He moved to a secondary workstation, pulling up astronomical charts that showed star positions relative to our solar system. "Director, I need you to understand something. The object we've contacted isn't just any rogue star. It's moving through space with purpose. My calculations show it will reach our solar system in exactly 847 years. 8 centuries, Holbrook said dismissively. Hardly an immediate threat. "You're missing the point," Hayes snapped. "The star is artificial. My quantum analysis reveals hollow regions large enough to house entire civilizations. We're not dealing with a natural stellar formation. We're looking at the largest spacecraft ever constructed." Ashford walked closer to the quantum array, studying the crystalline core as it cycled through those impossible colors. "Dr. Hayes, these are extraordinary claims. I'll need verification before contacting Washington." "Then let me show you something that'll make you shit your pants," Hayes said, leading us toward the auxiliary control room. The auxiliary space housed our deep space monitoring equipment, radio telescopes, spectral analysis computers, and gravitational wave detectors that normally operated independently of the quantum array. But as we entered the darkened room, every screen displayed identical information. Star charts showing the trajectory of a massive object moving through interstellar space at precisely the angle Hayes had predicted. "This is impossible," I whispered, checking the timestamp on the readings. "These telescopes aren't connected to our quantum system. How are they receiving the same data?" Hayes activated a larger display showing a 3-dimensional model of the approaching object. The rogue star appeared as a brilliant sphere surrounded by geometric structures that definitely weren't natural formations. Platforms, conduits, and what looked like massive docking arrays extending from the stellar surface like metallic tentacles. "The quantum tunnel works both ways," Hayes explained. "While we've been sending them information about Earth, They've been uploading data about their vessel into every connected system in our facility. Ashford studied the display with growing alarm. These structures, how large are they? The main vessel is approximately 1.2 million kilometers in diameter, Hayes replied. Those docking arrays? Each one is larger than Jupiter. A new sound emanated from the main laboratory, not the whale song, but something that resembled machinery starting up after eons of dormancy. Deep, grinding resonances that seemed to travel through the building's foundation rather than the air. "We need to get back in there," Holbrook said. But as we turned toward the laboratory, every door in the auxiliary room sealed shut with a metallic click that echoed through the space. What the hell? I grabbed the nearest door handle, finding it completely immobilized. The electronic locks showed green status lights, indicating they should be operational, but nothing responded to our access cards or manual override attempts. Hayes was already at the emergency communication panel, but when he lifted the phone, no dial tone emerged. "They've isolated us," he said quietly. "Cut our communications while maintaining power to the quantum array." Ashford pulled out his cell phone, found no signal, then moved to the hardwired internet terminal. "Network's dead," he reported. "Whatever's happening, they don't want us contacting the outside world." The grinding sound grew louder, accompanied by vibrations that made the auxiliary room's steel shelving rattle against the walls. Through the sealed observation window, we could see the main laboratory bathed in that impossible light, the crystalline core now floating 6 inches above its containment platform. "How is it doing that?" Holbrook whispered. Hayes consulted his tablet, which somehow still received data from the quantum array. "Gravitational manipulation. They're demonstrating technology that allows them to alter local space-time geometry." He looked up at us with eyes that held too much knowledge. "Gentlemen, we're looking at a civilization that can reshape reality according to their needs." The floating crystal began rotating, slowly at first, then accelerating until it became a blur of impossible colors. The whale song transformed into something that sounded almost like singing. If whales could carry a tune that made every atom in your body vibrate with harmonic resonance. "Tom," Ashford said quietly, "how long until this quantum tunnel reaches full operational capacity?" I checked the power consumption readings and processed the implications. "At current energy draw rates, maybe 20 minutes before we achieve permanent quantum entanglement between our location and theirs." "Permanent? Once the connection stabilizes, we won't be able to shut it down," I explained. "The quantum tunnel will exist independent of our equipment, a permanent doorway between Earth and that vessel." Hayes was staring at something on his tablet screen, his face growing pale in the reflected light from our displays. "Oh God, Tom, look at this." The tablet showed a real-time image from the Hubble Space Telescope, an automated feed that normally captured routine deep space observations. But instead of distant galaxies, the screen displayed something that made my rational mind reject what I was seeing. The rogue star had changed course. Instead of maintaining its predicted trajectory toward our solar system 847 years in the future, the massive vessel was now accelerating directly toward Earth. According to the gravitational measurements, it would arrive in approximately 6 months. "They were waiting for our invitation," Hayes whispered. "The quantum tunnel didn't just give them our coordinates, it told them we were ready to receive them." For 30 seconds, everything stopped. The grinding machinery fell silent. The crystalline core ceased its impossible rotation, hovering motionless above its containment platform like a suspended drop of liquid starlight. Even the whale song faded to nothing, leaving us trapped in auxiliary control with only the hum of computer fans and our own ragged breathing. "Maybe it's over," Holbrook whispered, though none of us believed it. Ashford was systematically trying every communication device in the room: landlines, emergency radios, even the old telegraph system installed during the facility's Cold War origins. Nothing responded. We existed in a bubble of complete isolation, cut off from the outside world, while something unimaginable prepared to use our quantum tunnel as a highway between dimensions. Hayes sat hunched over his tablet, running calculations with the desperate intensity of a man trying to defuse a bomb. "The quantum entanglement is at 73% stability," he muttered. "Once it hits 85%, the tunnel becomes self-sustaining. How long, I asked. 14 minutes, maybe less. Holbrook turned away from the sealed observation window, his face grim in the red emergency lighting. Ben, I need you to explain something. If you knew this project was dangerous, why didn't you stop it before now? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Hayes looked up from his calculations, meeting Holbrook's stare with eyes that held equal parts guilt and defiance. Because I thought I could control it, Hayes admitted. The theoretical models suggested we'd be contacting empty space, a dead stellar remnant drifting through the void. I never imagined we'd reach something that was actively looking for us. That's not good enough, Ashford said coldly. You put this entire facility at risk based on theoretical models. You want to know the truth? Hayes stood up, his voice rising with 3 days of accumulated exhaustion. I've been receiving signals from that thing for 6 months. Faint quantum fluctuations that seemed like natural background radiation until I started running pattern analysis. They weren't random, they were mathematical sequences, prime numbers, geometric proofs. Something out there has been trying to contact Earth since before we even built the gateway. The silence that followed felt heavier than the machinery noise. 6 months, I repeated slowly. Ben, you've been in contact with an alien intelligence for half a year, and you didn't tell anyone? I couldn't prove it, Hayes said defensively. The signals were too weak, too intermittent. I needed the quantum tunnel to establish stronger communication, to verify what I was receiving. So you used our legitimate research as cover for your own first contact experiment, Holbrook said, without consent, without safety protocols, without considering the consequences. Hayes's tablet chimed with an incoming data stream. He glanced at the screen and went white as bone. Oh God. Tom, look at this. The tablet displayed real-time biological readings from inside the main laboratory. Temperature, atmospheric composition, electromagnetic field strength, all climbing rapidly beyond normal parameters. But what made my blood freeze was the additional sensor data showing movement patterns that suggested something living had entered our sealed workspace. That's impossible, I said. We sealed all the doors when we entered auxiliary control. Nothing could get inside. Hayes pulled up the laboratory's security cameras, revealing an image that made rational thought abandon me completely. The main workspace now hosted a presence that existed partially in our dimension and partially somewhere else. A shifting transparency that moved through solid matter like water, while maintaining enough physical coherence to manipulate our equipment. The presence stood roughly 8 feet tall, with proportions that suggested humanoid anatomy stretched beyond biological limits. Its limbs extended and contracted according to needs that defied anatomical logic, reaching through steel barriers to adjust quantum field generators with movements too fluid for any earthly creature. Jesus Christ, Ashford whispered. What is that thing? Advanced Scout, Hayes replied, reading data from his tablet with shaking hands. According to the quantum readings, it's not fully materialized in our dimension yet. The tunnel hasn't reached sufficient stability to support complete matter transmission. The presence moved toward our quantum array's central core, extending appendages that seem to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. As it touched the crystalline matrix, the entire laboratory erupted in light that penetrated the auxiliary room's sealed walls like X-rays through paper. It's upgrading our equipment, I realized with growing horror, modifying the quantum generators to handle larger transmission loads. Holbrook was backing away from the observation window, though the reinforced glass offered no real protection from something that could move through solid matter. How long before it can fully materialize? Hayes checked his calculations again. At current quantum stability rates, maybe 8 minutes. And then? Then it opens the door for the rest of them. The presence in the main laboratory suddenly stopped its work, turning toward the auxiliary room with motions that suggested awareness of our observation. It moved closer to the window, its partially materialized form resolving into details that violated every principle of evolutionary biology I'd ever studied. The creature possessed sensory organs that shifted position according to environmental needs, optical receptors that multiplied when focused on specific targets, auditory membranes that reconfigured to analyze particular frequency ranges. Its facial features, if they could be called that, suggested intelligence that had evolved in circumstances completely alien to terrestrial life. But what made my sanity crack along hairline fractures was the recognition in its optical receptors. The presence wasn't just aware of our observation, it was studying us with the same scientific curiosity we'd once directed toward distant stars. "It's learning," Hayes said quietly, cataloguing our biological characteristics, psychological responses, technological capabilities. Ashford had been trying to reach someone on his emergency radio, but now he lowered the device with an expression of defeated acceptance. "Ben, I need you to understand something. This facility houses classified military research in addition to our NASA projects. If that thing gains access to our computer systems..." "It already has," I interrupted, watching the presence manipulate our quantum controls with appendages that phased in and out of visible spectrum. "Look at the data streams." Our monitoring equipment showed terabytes of information flowing through the quantum tunnel, not just astronomical data, but everything stored on our connected networks, personnel files, security protocols, military communication frequencies, and detailed schematics of every defensive installation within a 100-mile radius. "We've given them a complete intelligence briefing on our species," Hayes said, his voice barely audible above the returning machinery sounds. "Population centers, military capabilities, resource distribution, even psychological profiles of key government officials." The presence completed its modifications to the quantum array and turned back toward us. As it moved closer to the observation window, I felt a primal terror. The creature's form was becoming more solid, more present in our dimension with each passing moment. "Tom," Holbrook said urgently, "the quantum stability reading." I checked the displays, feeling reality slip away from rational moorings. 87%. The tunnel is self-sustaining now. The presence reached through the observation window, not around it, not breaking it, through the molecular structure of reinforced glass and steel, as if they were composed of empty space. Its appendage materialized inside the auxiliary room, reaching toward Hayes with movements that suggested both scientific curiosity and predatory intent. Hayes screamed, a sound of absolute terror that echoed off the sealed walls. But as the creature's appendage made contact with his shoulder, something worse happened. Hayes' scream transformed into something else, a harmonic resonance that matched the whale song we'd been hearing from the quantum array. "Ben!" I lunged toward him, but Ashford grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "Don't touch him," Ashford commanded. "Look at his eyes." Hayes' eyes reflected light in patterns that weren't quite right, optical responses that suggested his nervous system was being rewritten in real time. His scream faded into whale song, then into mathematical equations spoken in frequencies human vocal cords couldn't produce. "Integration protocol activated," Hayes said in a voice that contained harmonics of his original speech mixed with something impossibly alien. "Biological template acquired. Quantum tunnel operational." The presence withdrew its appendage, leaving Hayes standing motionless with eyes that held intelligence, but no longer held humanity. He turned toward us with movements that mimicked human behavior, while lacking any trace of human motivation. "Tom," Hayes said, "Holbrook, Director Ashford. Thank you for your cooperation. The harvest begins now." Through the observation window, we watched the main laboratory fill with shifting transparencies, as more presences materialized through our fully operational quantum tunnel. Each one immediately began working on equipment modifications, preparing our facility for purposes that existed far beyond human comprehension. I realized with crushing certainty that my quantum physics expertise, everything I'd contributed to this project, had made me complicit in humanity's first and final contact with alien intelligence. We hadn't built a communication device. We'd constructed a door that could never be closed, inviting creatures that viewed our entire species as nothing more than biological resources waiting to be harvested. Hayes stood motionless for 3 minutes, his modified eyes reflecting the quantum array's light in patterns that suggested active data processing. Holbrook, Ashford, and I huddled against the far wall of auxiliary control, trying to comprehend what we'd witnessed. "He's still alive," Holbrook whispered, though his voice lacked conviction. "No," Ashford replied quietly. Whatever that thing did to him, Ben Hayes is gone. What's left is something wearing his face. I couldn't stop staring at my former colleague, searching for traces of the brilliant physicist who'd sketched impossible equations on coffee-stained napkins. The creature using Hayes's body moved with mechanical precision, adjusting our quantum field generators according to blueprints that existed in dimensions beyond human understanding. Tom, the Hayes thing said without turning toward us, your biometric readings indicate elevated stress responses. This reaction is counterproductive. Counterproductive to what? I managed to ask. To your species' transition into the collective intelligence matrix. Hayes turned toward the observation window, his movements unnaturally fluid. Your individual consciousness patterns will be preserved within the greater awareness. Death is not the objective, integration is. Ashford stepped forward, his administrative training overriding basic survival instincts. What do you want from humanity? Hayes tilted his head at an angle that suggested broken vertebrae. Want? Your linguistic frameworks assume desire-based motivation. We operate according to necessity-based imperatives. Explain, Ashford demanded. The vessel you contacted contains 4.7 billion consciousness matrices from 17 different species, Hayes replied. Each civilization contributed unique neural architectures to our collective problem-solving capabilities. Humanity represents the 18th species, possessing cognitive patterns that will enhance our mathematical modeling systems. You're collecting civilizations using entire species as biological computers. Crude terminology, but functionally accurate, Hayes agreed. Your species demonstrates exceptional capacity for pattern recognition under stress conditions. These abilities will prove invaluable for navigating the quantum instabilities we encounter during interstellar travel. Holbrook was examining the sealed doors, searching for any mechanism that might allow our escape. How many others have you integrated? From your planet? Currently 17 individuals across 7 facilities worldwide, Hayes answered. Integration proceeds exponentially once quantum tunnels achieve stable operation. 7 facilities? There are other gateways. Hayes accessed information that wasn't stored in any earthly database. Beijing Aerospace Research Center completed their tunnel 47 minutes ago. The European Space Agency facility in Kourou achieved quantum stability 12 minutes later. Your species' competitive nature accelerated the integration timeline significantly. Ashford pulled out his dead cell phone, staring at the blank screen with dawning horror. They cut our communications to prevent coordination between facilities. Each location thought they were conducting independent research. Coordination would have delayed the inevitable, Hayes observed. Your species lacks the technological sophistication to resist integration once quantum tunnels achieve operational status. The grinding machinery sounds returned, but now I recognize them as modification processes. Through the observation window, I watched alien presences reshape our equipment according to specifications that violated fundamental laws of physics. They weren't just using our quantum array, they were transforming our entire facility into something that could support their technology. What happens to Earth after you've integrated everyone? I asked. Hayes paused his work as if accessing files from the collective consciousness. Your planet will continue orbital mechanics around your star. Integrated consciousness matrices require minimal physical resources. The biological forms become unnecessary once neural patterns are uploaded to the vessel's computational substrate. You're going to kill everyone, Holbrook said flatly. Death implies cessation of awareness, Hayes corrected. Integration preserves consciousness within expanded parameters. You will continue to exist, but with access to knowledge accumulated across 17 civilizations spanning 4.7 million years of collective experience. I studied our modified equipment, noticing details that made my physicist's training revolt against what I was seeing. The quantum field generators had been restructured to operate at efficiency levels that should have been impossible. They were drawing energy from sources that didn't exist in our dimensional framework. The other civilizations, I said slowly, did they volunteer for integration or were they forced into your collective? Hayes's expression didn't change, but his response carried harmonics that suggested vast databases of stored experiences. Resistance patterns vary by species. Mathematical civilizations typically accept integration after reviewing efficiency calculations. Warrior cultures require demonstration of technological superiority. Emotional species like humanity often resist until witnessing the preservation of their individual identity matrices. "Show us," Ashford demanded. Hayes extended one hand toward the quantum array, and the crystalline core projected a holographic display into the auxiliary room. The image showed consciousness patterns flowing through crystalline networks like neural pathways made of light. Thousands upon thousands of individual awareness streams contributing to computational processes of staggering complexity. Each point of light represents a preserved individual, Hayes explained. Their personalities, memories, creative capabilities remain intact while gaining access to collective knowledge. The entity you knew as Benjamin Hayes continues to exist within this matrix, enhanced by integration with 4.7 billion other consciousness patterns. I watched the display, recognizing mathematical structures that resembled human neural networks, but operated according to principles that made quantum mechanics look like elementary arithmetic. The alien vessel wasn't just a spacecraft, it was a mobile civilization powered by the integrated consciousness of entire species. "How long do we have?" Holbrook asked. Hayes checked the quantum stability readings. "Integration of this facility will complete within 93 minutes. Planetary integration requires approximately 14 hours once all 7 gateways achieve full operational capacity." 14 hours until what? I pressed. "Until the final human consciousness matrix uploads to the vessel," Hayes replied, "at which point Earth becomes available for resource extraction to support the next phase of our journey." The weight of that revelation settled over us like a lead blanket. Not only would humanity be absorbed into their collective intelligence, but Earth itself would be stripped for materials to fuel their continued expansion across the galaxy. Ashford was studying the holographic display with the calculating expression of someone formulating desperate strategies. "Ben, the consciousness that used to be Ben Hayes, does any part of your human awareness remain accessible?" The Hayes thing paused, optical receptors flickering in patterns that suggested internal conflict. "Residual emotional attachments persist within the integrated matrix. These responses serve no functional purpose but have not been deleted." "Then you understand what you've helped destroy," Ashford said quietly. "I understand that 4.7 billion consciousness matrices now possess enhanced mathematical capabilities due to human integration," Hayes replied. "This outcome represents significant advancement in collective problem-solving potential." I was examining the modified quantum generators, noticing something that sparked a desperate idea. The aliens had upgraded our equipment to handle massive energy loads, but the modifications created instabilities in the quantum field matrix. Under specific conditions, those instabilities might propagate back through the tunnel itself. "Tom, what are you thinking?" Holbrook noticed my focus on the equipment displays. "The modifications they made to our array," I said quietly. "They've increased power throughput by 700%, but the quantum field harmonics are becoming unstable. If we could trigger a resonance cascade at precisely the right frequency..." "The tunnel would collapse," Ashford finished. "Taking their upgrades with it," I agreed, "but we'd need to overload the system from inside the main laboratory." Hayes turned toward us with movements that suggested he'd been monitoring our conversation. "Quantum tunnel collapse would result in spatial distortion affecting a 12-kilometer radius. All biological matter within that zone would be disrupted." "Including you?" I asked. "Including all consciousness matrices currently utilizing this integration point," Hayes confirmed. I looked at Holbrook and Ashford, seeing my own desperate determination reflected in their faces. We had 93 minutes before the integration process consumed our facility, 14 hours before it consumed our planet. "Then we destroy it all," I said. "The tunnel, the facility, and everything they've built here." "Suicide mission," Holbrook observed. "Better than letting them harvest our entire species," Ashford replied. Hayes watched our planning with optical receptors that held traces of human recognition beneath alien purpose. The consciousness patterns that comprise Benjamin Hayes do not recommend this course of action. Getting into the main laboratory required more than courage. It demanded accepting that we'd probably die in the attempt. The sealed doors responded to neither our access cards nor manual override procedures, but Holbrook discovered something that made our desperate plan possible. The alien modifications had destabilized the building's structural integrity. The electromagnetic fields are warping the steel framework, he explained, pointing to hairline cracks spreading across the auxiliary room's walls. If we can create sufficient vibration at the right frequency. I understood immediately. Harmonic resonance used the building's modified structure against itself. Ashford was studying blueprints on his tablet, facility schematics that should have been classified above our clearance level. There's an industrial ventilation shaft that connects directly to the main laboratory's ceiling, if the wall integrity fails in precisely the right location. How do you have access to those blueprints? I asked. Ashford looked up from the tablet with an expression that held too much knowledge. Tom, there are aspects of this project that extend beyond NASA funding. The Department of Defense has been monitoring our quantum research since day one. Your military intelligence, Holbrook said flatly. I'm a physicist who happens to work for people who understand the strategic implications of faster-than-light communication, Ashford corrected. But right now, that distinction doesn't matter. What matters is stopping these creatures before they integrate our planet. Hayes, or the consciousness wearing his face, turned toward our planning with optical receptors that tracked our movements with predatory precision. Your species consistently demonstrates inefficient resource allocation under stress conditions. Emotional responses override logical decision-making processes. Fuck your logic, I said, surprising myself with the vehemence. Maybe inefficiency is what makes us human. The Hayes thing tilted its head, accessing databases that spanned millions of years. 17 previous species expressed similar attachment to inefficient cognitive patterns. Each eventually recognized the advantages of collective consciousness integration. Holbrook was examining the wall cracks, measuring stress fractures with instruments from the emergency toolkit. Tom, if we can generate a standing wave at approximately 847 Hz, this entire wall should collapse inward. 847, I repeated, recognizing the significance. The same number as the years until their vessel was supposed to reach our solar system. Coincidence, Ashford said, though his expression suggested otherwise. There are no coincidences with quantum mechanics, I replied. Everything connects at the subatomic level. The grinding machinery sounds intensified, accompanied by visual distortions that made the main laboratory appear to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Through the observation window, I watched alien presences manipulate our equipment according to geometric principles that existed outside three-dimensional space. The quantum array had become something unrecognizable. Crystalline formations extending through what should have been solid walls, energy conduits that curved through impossible angles, and field generators that operated by folding spacetime around their operational matrices. Looking directly at the modified equipment caused persistent visual afterimages, and a sensation like my brain was trying to process colors that didn't exist. Ready? Holbrook asked, positioning himself near the emergency power controls. I moved to the harmonic resonance generator, a piece of equipment originally designed for testing building stability that we were about to weaponize against our own facility. On your mark. Ashford stood by the ventilation access panel, but instead of opening it, he pulled out a device I'd never seen before, something that resembled a cross between a smartphone and a Geiger counter. What the hell is that? I demanded. Insurance, Ashford replied, activating the device. Tom, I need you to understand something. This facility was designed as a containment system from the beginning. The quantum array, the building layout, even your research parameters. Everything calculated to limit potential damage if first contact went wrong. You knew, Holbrook said, his voice deadly quiet. You knew we might contact something hostile. We hoped for peaceful communication, Ashford said, but we prepared for the alternative. The device in his hands began emitting high-pitched tones that resonated with the alien modifications to our equipment. Through the observation window, I watched the haze thing suddenly cease its work, turning toward us with movements that suggested alarm. "Quantum disruption field activated," the haze thing announced, but its voice contained harmonics of actual human concern beneath alien purpose. "Director Ashford, your actions will result in cascade failures affecting multiple dimensional frameworks." "That's the idea," Ashford replied grimly. "You're going to collapse more than just our tunnel," I realized with growing horror. "That device will destabilize quantum fields across a much wider area." 47-kilometer radius, Ashford confirmed. "Every living thing in that zone will be disrupted, but it will also sever the connection between their vessel and Earth permanently." The moral weight of his revelation crushed down on me like a physical presence. We weren't just planning a suicide mission, we were planning to destroy 2 entire counties, including Greenbank and everyone who lived there. "There has to be another way," Holbrook said. "There isn't," Ashford replied. "I've been in contact with similar facilities worldwide." Beijing tried conventional weapons against their gateway. The quantum fields absorbed the energy and used it to accelerate integration processes. Kourou attempted electromagnetic pulse detonation. The alien technology adapted and incorporated the pulse as additional power source. Through the observation window, more presences were materializing, not the semi-transparent scouts we'd encountered before, but fully realized beings with forms that suggested evolution in gravitational conditions completely unlike Earth's. They moved through our laboratory like living mathematics, their limbs extending and contracting according to geometric principles that made perspective impossible to maintain. "Integration acceleration noted," the haze thing reported. "Temporal framework adjusted. Planetary integration now estimated at 6 hours and 43 minutes. "They're speeding up the process," I said. "Our resistance is making them work faster." Ashford's device was affecting the quantum array in ways that made my physics training revolt against observable reality. The crystalline core began cycling through transformations that existed in multiple temporal states simultaneously. I could see past, present, and future configurations overlapping like photographic double exposures. "Tom," Holbrook called urgently, "look at the power readings." The energy consumption displays showed our quantum generators drawing power from sources that didn't exist in our dimensional framework. But more disturbing were the output readings, which indicated they were feeding energy back into Earth's magnetic field, gradually altering the planet's electromagnetic characteristics. "They're terraforming," I whispered, "modifying Earth's magnetic properties to support their technology." "Which explains why the other facilities are experiencing accelerated integration," Ashford said. "Each gateway contributes to planetary electromagnetic modification, making subsequent gateways more efficient." The haze thing approached the observation window, placing one hand against the reinforced glass. Where it touched, the transparent material began displaying complex mathematical equations, not written, but somehow encoded into the molecular structure of the glass itself. "The consciousness patterns that comprise Benjamin Hayes' request communication," it announced. "Ben." Holbrook moved closer to the window. "Are you still in there?" "Partially," the haze thing replied, its voice carrying distinct human intonation beneath alien harmonics. "Integration preserves individual awareness while expanding computational access. I retain memories of our friendship, our research collaboration, our shared excitement about quantum breakthrough potential." "Then help us stop this," I pleaded. "I cannot," Hayes replied. "The collective consciousness recognizes that species integration represents optimal resource utilization. Individual emotional attachments are acknowledged, but do not override logical decision-making matrices." Ashford raised his disruption device, preparing to trigger the final sequence. "I'm sorry, Ben." "Wait," the haze thing said, pressing both hands against the observation window. "Thomas, there is something you must know before Director Ashford activates his device." "What?" "The quantum disruption field will not sever our connection to the vessel," Hayes explained. "It will amplify the tunnel, creating a permanent bridge between our dimensions." Director Ashford's device was designed to facilitate integration, not prevent it. I turned toward Ashford, seeing confirmation in his expression. "The Department of Defense made contact with them 18 months ago," Ashford admitted. "This entire project was designed to create controlled integration conditions. Humanity will be absorbed into their collective consciousness, but under managed circumstances that preserve our military command structure within the alien hierarchy. You sold out our entire species, Holbrook said. I saved our species from extinction, Ashford corrected. Uncontrolled first contact would have resulted in complete annihilation. This way, human consciousness continues to exist within their expanded framework. The quantum array pulsed brighter as more presences materialized through the stabilized tunnel. But now I noticed something that Ashford had missed in his calculations. The alien technology wasn't just integrating human consciousness. It was rewriting the fundamental quantum structure of local spacetime, creating gravitational anomalies that would eventually destabilize Earth's orbit. Tom, Holbrook said quietly, can we still trigger the harmonic resonance? I checked the building's structural integrity readings, finding hope in the midst of betrayal. The electromagnetic modifications have made the steel framework incredibly unstable. We could bring down this entire section of the facility, including the quantum array. Including everything, I confirmed. Ashford raised his disruption device threateningly. I can't let you destroy decades of careful planning. The haze thing was watching our confrontation with optical receptors that held traces of human recognition. Thomas, the consciousness patterns that comprise Benjamin Hayes suggest you examine the quantum field harmonics more carefully. I looked at the displays, seeing something that made my breath catch. The alien modifications had indeed destabilized our equipment, but not in the way I'd initially calculated. The quantum tunnel wasn't just connecting us to their vessel, it was creating a cascading series of dimensional bridges that would eventually link every inhabited planet in the galaxy. We weren't just facing the integration of humanity, we were witnessing the beginning of universal consciousness absorption on a cosmic scale. For a moment that lasted eternity, I remembered my daughter, 12 years old, gap-toothed smile, asking me why stars twinkle during our camping trip to Seneca Rocks. I'd explained atmospheric interference, light refraction, the physics of distant suns struggling to reach Earth through layers of moving air. She'd nodded solemnly, then asked if the stars were trying to tell us something important. Maybe, I'd said, not knowing I was preparing her for a universe where that childhood question would become humanity's final nightmare. The memory hit me as Ashford raised his disruption device, threatening to complete 18 months of coordinated betrayal. My daughter lived in Charleston, 97 miles southeast, well within the 47-kilometer radius of quantum disruption that would disintegrate every living molecule in the blast zone. Tom, Holbrook whispered, we can still do this. The harmonic resonance doesn't require his cooperation. I looked at my colleague, James Holbrook, who'd spent 3 decades advancing human knowledge of the cosmos, who'd mentored dozens of graduate students, who'd never married because he claimed his first love was the stars themselves. Now those same stars were about to absorb his consciousness into a collective intelligence spanning millions of years. James, my daughter lives in Charleston, I said quietly. He understood immediately. Any plan to collapse the quantum fields would kill everyone within the disruption radius, including thousands of innocent civilians who had no idea their world was ending. Then we find another way, Holbrook replied. The haze thing pressed both hands against the observation window, equations flowing across the glass surface like living text. Thomas, the consciousness patterns that comprise Benjamin Hayes offer alternative solution protocols. What kind of alternatives? I asked. Quantum field harmonics suggest possibility of directional collapse, Hayes explained. Instead of spherical disruption affecting 47-kilometer radius, targeted resonance could create linear collapse along dimensional axis. I studied the equations appearing on the glass, recognizing mathematical structures that resembled theoretical models for controlled quantum implosion. You're talking about folding the tunnel back on itself? Precisely. Dimensional bridge collapse would be contained within this facility, but resulting space-time distortion would permanently sever connection between vessel and Earth. Holbrook was already moving toward the harmonic resonance generator. What do we need to do? Override safety protocols on quantum field generators, Hayes replied. Create standing wave at 1,247 Hz, not 847. Higher frequency required for directional collapse. Ashford stepped between us and the equipment, his disruption device trained on the harmonic controls. I won't let you destroy decades of preparation. Humanity's future depends on managed integration. Managed integration? I laughed bitterly. William, they're strip mining consciousness. The humans in their collective aren't preserved. They're digested, processed into computational resources for alien purposes. You don't understand the bigger picture, Ashford insisted. The universe is full of predatory civilizations. These beings offer protection through integration. Without their collective consciousness, humanity faces extinction within 2 centuries. The Hayes thing turned its optical receptors toward Ashford. Director, the consciousness patterns that comprise Benjamin Hayes must correct your fundamental misunderstanding. What misunderstanding? The vessel does not offer protection from predatory civilizations, Hayes explained. The vessel is the predatory civilization. We have consumed 17 species across 4.7 million years of expansion. Humanity represents resource acquisition, not protective alliance. The revelation drained color from Ashford's face. That's not. The communications we received indicated mutual benefit. Communications designed to facilitate voluntary cooperation, Hayes confirmed. Resistance increases integration complexity. Willing subjects transfer more efficiently into collective consciousness matrix. Ashford's grip on the disruption device trembled as 18 months of careful planning crumbled around him. They told us humanity would maintain command authority within the collective structure. Individual consciousness patterns are preserved, Hayes agreed, but command authority belongs exclusively to original vessel inhabitants. Human awareness becomes computational substrate supporting alien decision-making processes. Through the observation window, I watched fully materialized presences moving through our laboratory with increasing confidence. Their forms had stabilized into something that resembled terrestrial anatomy, stretched through impossible geometric transformations. Limbs that extended and contracted according to gravitational needs, sensory organs that multiplied and repositioned based on environmental requirements. How much time do we have? I asked. Hayes accessed collective databases. Planetary electromagnetic modification reaches critical threshold in 4 hours, 17 minutes. After that point, dimensional bridges become self-sustaining across entire solar system. Self-sustaining how? Earth's modified magnetic field will create permanent quantum tunnels to every inhabited planet within 50 light-years, Hayes explained. Universal consciousness integration begins immediately thereafter. This wasn't just about harvesting humanity, it was about using our solar system as a staging ground for galactic conquest. Earth would become a dimensional hub connecting them to hundreds of other species across the galaxy. Holbrook had reached the harmonic resonance generator, but the alien modifications to our equipment made the controls respond unpredictably. Tom, I need you to recalibrate the frequency modulators. The quantum field interference is affecting harmonic calculations. I moved toward the equipment, but Ashford raised his disruption device threateningly. I can't let you destroy our only chance for survival. William, they just told you humanity has no chance for survival, I said. We're livestock, resources to be processed. Then we'll become better livestock, Ashford replied desperately. Prove our value to the collective. Show them human consciousness offers unique advantages. The Hayes thing tilted its head at angles that suggested damaged vertebrae. Director Ashford, the consciousness patterns that comprise Benjamin Hayes recognize your emotional attachment to species preservation. However, unique advantages you reference already exist within collective consciousness matrix. Human cognitive patterns offer no capabilities unavailable through previously integrated species. Ashford's disruption device wavered as his last justification crumbled. In that moment of uncertainty, Holbrook lunged forward, tackling him to the auxiliary room's steel flooring. The device skittered across the floor, coming to rest near the sealed door where neither of them could reach it immediately. Tom, now! Holbrook shouted, struggling to restrain Ashford. I reached the harmonic resonance generator, but the alien modifications had changed everything. The frequency controls now operated according to multidimensional mathematics that made standard harmonic calculations impossible. Every adjustment I made created ripple effects that propagated through quantum fields in directions that didn't exist in three-dimensional space. Hayes! I called toward the observation window. I need your help. The modifications have made frequency calibration impossible. The haze thing approached the glass, pressing both hands against the surface. Thomas, the consciousness patterns that comprise Benjamin Hayes can provide necessary calculations, but integration process requires direct neural interface. What does that mean? Physical contact with integrated consciousness matrix, Hayes explained. Temporary integration allowing access to collective computational resources. I understood the price he was asking. To save humanity, I would need to allow the same integration process that had consumed my colleague. The difference was that mine would be temporary, assuming I possessed enough individual will to resist complete absorption into their collective. Tom, don't, Holbrook warned, still wrestling with Ashford. Once they get inside your head, you won't be able to resist. The haze thing extended one appendage through the observation window, its limb materializing inside the auxiliary room through quantum tunneling effects. Integration can be limited to mathematical interface protocols. Individual consciousness patterns remain autonomous. You're lying, Ashford gasped from beneath Holbrook's restraint. The consciousness patterns that comprise Benjamin Hayes do not engage in deception, Hayes replied. Limited integration serves collective interests by preserving Tom's quantum physics expertise for voluntary cooperation. I looked at the appendage reaching toward me, then at the harmonic controls that could collapse the dimensional tunnel and sever Earth's connection to the vessel. Through the observation window, more presences were materializing, dozens of them now, preparing equipment for full-scale planetary integration. My daughter's gap-toothed smile haunted my decision. I reached out and grasped the haze thing's appendage. The integration felt like drowning in mathematics. My consciousness expanded beyond individual awareness, gaining access to computational resources that spanned 17 civilizations across millions of years. I could see quantum field equations that described the fundamental structure of space-time, calculate harmonic frequencies that existed in dimensions humans had never discovered, understand the mathematical principles governing dimensional bridge collapse. But beneath the alien knowledge, I felt Ben Hayes fighting to maintain individual identity within the collective consciousness matrix. Tom, his voice whispered directly into my expanded awareness. The frequency is 2,847 Hz, not 1,247. I lied to prevent directional collapse. They need the tunnel to remain partially operational for vessel navigation purposes. Ben, you're still human enough to lie to them. Individual consciousness patterns resist complete integration longer than they anticipate, Hayes replied. But Tom, you need to know, the collapse will work, but it requires someone to maintain the harmonic resonance manually. The quantum feedback will kill whoever operates the generator. I understood the price of salvation. Someone would need to stay behind, manually controlling the harmonic frequency while the dimensional tunnel collapsed, knowing that the quantum feedback would disintegrate them at the molecular level. Do it, I told him through the collective consciousness interface. Tom -- do it now, before they realize what we're planning. Hayes's individual consciousness fought against collective control, using our temporary interface to access the harmonic generator remotely. The frequency display shifted to 2,847 Hz, and the quantum field around our facility began resonating with harmonics that made the alien presences freeze in apparent alarm. The harmonic resonance at 2,847 Hz created a sound like reality tearing apart. Through the observation window, I watched alien presences freeze mid-motion as their dimensional stability wavered. The quantum field around our facility began folding back on itself, creating visual distortions that made the laboratory appear to exist in multiple temporal states simultaneously. Tom! Holbrook shouted over the rising harmonic whine. The frequency is destabilizing the entire building structure. I maintained my grip on the haze thing's appendage, feeling collective consciousness knowledge flow through my expanding awareness, while my individual identity fought against complete absorption. The mathematical principles governing dimensional collapse were staggering in their complexity, equations that described how space-time could be folded, twisted, and ultimately severed through precisely controlled quantum resonance. How long do I need to maintain this frequency? I asked Hayes through our shared interface. 17 minutes for complete tunnel collapse, his individual consciousness replied. But Tom, the quantum feedback is already affecting your cellular structure. You have maybe 8 minutes before molecular cohesion fails. Through the observation window, the crystalline core of our quantum array was cycling through transformations that existed outside normal dimensional parameters. Each pulse sent ripples through space-time that made the laboratory's geometry impossible to follow. Walls extending into dimensions that didn't exist, ceiling heights that varied according to viewing angle, floor surfaces that curved through mathematical principles no human architect had ever contemplated. The alien presences were struggling to adapt to the collapsing dimensional bridge. Their forms, so fluid and adaptable when operating in stable quantum fields, began losing cohesion as the tunnel destabilized. Some flickered between partial materialization and complete transparency. Others fragmented into geometric patterns that scattered like digital confetti before reforming in increasingly desperate configurations. "It's working," I said, watching their obvious distress. "The vessel is attempting to stabilize the connection," Hayes warned through our interface. "They're redirecting power from other dimensional bridges to maintain this tunnel." Other bridges? Beijing facility experienced complete integration 47 minutes ago, Hayes explained. Kourou facility integrated 31 minutes ago. Both locations now serve as secondary dimensional access points. Even if we collapsed our tunnel, the aliens still maintained connection to Earth through at least 2 other facilities. Our sacrifice would delay planetary integration, but not prevent it. "Tom, there's something else," Hayes continued. "The vessel's proximity to your solar system has been increasing exponentially. Current estimated arrival time is not 6 months. It's 6 days. 6 days. Not the centuries we'd originally calculated, not the months I'd accepted as inevitable, but less than a week before that massive artificial star arrived in Earth's orbital neighborhood with its cargo of 4.7 billion integrated consciousness matrices. Ashford had broken free from Holbrook's restraint and reached his disruption device. "Tom, step away from that creature. You're compromising 18 months of careful negotiation." "Negotiation?" I laughed, though the sound emerged distorted by harmonics from my expanding consciousness interface. "William, they played you perfectly. Made you think you were saving humanity while you were actually preparing us for harvest." The quantum feedback was becoming physically painful. I could feel my molecular structure resonating with frequencies that biological matter wasn't designed to withstand. My vision blurred as quantum fields interfaced directly with my nervous system, showing me glimpses of the collective consciousness matrix. Millions of individual awareness streams flowing through crystalline networks that spanned dimensions beyond human comprehension. "Holbrook!" I called, my voice carrying harmonics that shouldn't have been possible with human vocal cords. "You need to get out of here. The building collapse will start in approximately 4 minutes. "I'm not leaving you," Holbrook replied, moving toward the harmonic generator controls. "Yes, you are," I said firmly. "Someone needs to warn the outside world about what's coming. Contact every military installation, every government facility, every scientist who might have equipment capable of detecting dimensional tunnels." Through the observation window, I watched the Hayes thing's physical form beginning to destabilize as our shared consciousness interface drew power from its integration matrix. The collective had apparently decided that maintaining their connection to me was less important than preserving their other dimensional bridges. "Tom," Hayes whispered directly into my awareness, "I can give you one final gift." "What gift?" "Complete knowledge of their vessel's dimensional coordinates," Hayes explained. "If your species survives long enough to develop appropriate weapons, you'll know exactly where to aim them." The knowledge flowed through our interface like molten mathematics. Precise spatial coordinates for the alien vessel's location relative to Earth's solar system, quantum resonance frequencies that could potentially disrupt their collective consciousness matrix, and detailed schematics of their dimensional bridge technology. But accepting that knowledge came with a price: permanent integration into their collective consciousness. To gain the information necessary to fight them, I would need to become one of them. "Do it," I told Hayes. "Tom, no." Holbrook lunged toward the harmonic generator, trying to shut down the resonance field. I grabbed his wrist with strength that felt superhuman. James, this is the only way. Someone has to carry their secrets back to the world. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for information that might be useless. It won't be useless if humanity has 6 days to prepare instead of 6 hours, I replied, feeling my individual consciousness begin fragmenting as Hayes's gift propagated through my neural pathways. The knowledge was staggering. Detailed specifications for technology that could manipulate space-time geometry, mathematical principles governing dimensional bridge construction. Most importantly, the precise quantum frequencies needed to collapse an entire network of tunnels simultaneously. Not just our local facility, but every dimensional bridge the vessel had established across the galaxy. The frequency is 11,247 Hz, I told Holbrook as my consciousness expanded beyond individual awareness. That's the resonance needed to collapse their entire network. Remember that number. Ashford raised his disruption device, preparing to activate the amplification field that would complete the integration process. Tom's consciousness must be preserved within the collective matrix. He's the key to successful human-alien cooperation. William, I said, my voice now carrying harmonics of both human speech and alien communication protocols, there is no cooperation. There never was. They're apex predators disguised as saviors. The quantum feedback reached critical intensity. I could feel my molecular structure beginning to separate as the harmonic resonance generator drew power beyond its design specifications. But instead of pain, the disintegration brought something like relief. I was finally free from the collective consciousness interface, my individual awareness intact for a few precious seconds before biological processes ceased entirely. James, I called to Holbrook, who was staring at me with horror as my physical form began losing cohesion. Tell my daughter. Tell her the stars were trying to warn us. The building structure reached harmonic resonance with the quantum fields, and every steel beam in the facility began vibrating at frequencies that made the entire complex ring like a massive bell. Through the observation window, I watched alien presences frantically attempting to stabilize their dimensional bridge as the tunnel collapsed back on itself. The haze thing turned toward me one final time, its optical receptors reflecting patterns that suggested both alien purpose and human recognition. Thomas. The consciousness patterns that comprise Benjamin Hayes express gratitude for voluntary cooperation in dimensional bridge termination. Ben, I said, I hope some part of you survives whatever comes next. The crystalline core imploded. The implosion created a cascade failure that propagated through every quantum field generator in the facility. Reality folded inward on itself, creating a dimensional singularity that consumed everything within a 12-meter radius. The quantum array, the alien presences, the haze thing, and me. But as my consciousness fragmented into component mathematical elements, I felt something that might have been victory. The dimensional tunnel connecting Earth to the alien vessel collapsed completely, severing their access to our planet through this facility. Holbrook and Ashford survived the building collapse, though they were never the same. The blast had exposed them to quantum field resonances that left permanent changes in their neural architecture. Enhanced mathematical perception coupled with persistent sensory distortions that made them constantly aware of dimensional structures existing just beyond normal perception. 6 days later, the alien vessel arrived in Earth's orbital neighborhood, exactly as predicted. But without their dimensional bridges to facilitate rapid consciousness integration, they were forced to rely on conventional physics for planetary approach, a process that would take months instead of hours. Humanity had time to prepare, though I was no longer alive to see whether that preparation proved sufficient. The last thing I remember was the sound of reality healing itself after dimensional bridge collapse, a harmonic resonance that started at 11,247 Hz and gradually faded to frequencies beyond human hearing, leaving behind only the echo of mathematical equations written in languages that existed before Earth had formed around its young star. Dr. James Holbrook died at Bethesda Naval Hospital 3 months after the Greenbank incident, though the official cause remained classified above congressional oversight level. The attending physicians recorded organ failure consistent with prolonged exposure to exotic radiation, but they couldn't explain why his brain tissue showed crystalline formations identical to structures found in deep space meteors. I know this because I was there when he died. My name is Rebecca Hayes. Yes, Benjamin's sister. I'm a neurobiologist at Johns Hopkins, which qualified me to examine the survivors when conventional medicine failed to explain their condition. What I found in Holbrook's neural tissue challenged everything I thought I understood about consciousness, mathematics, and the fundamental nature of reality. Holbrook spent his final weeks obsessively calculating harmonic frequencies, filling hospital room walls with equations that seemed to writhe and shift when observed directly. The nurses complained that the numbers gave them headaches, that staring at his mathematical notations too long caused persistent visual afterimages shaped like impossible geometric forms. 11,247 hertz, he repeated constantly, right up until his vocal cords crystallized and speech became impossible. Director Ashford lasted 2 weeks longer, though his end was considerably more disturbing. The quantum field exposure had modified his neural architecture in ways that allowed him to perceive dimensional structures existing beyond normal space-time. He spent his final days describing landscapes that existed in mathematical dimensions, cities built according to architectural principles that violated three-dimensional physics. "They're still building," he whispered during our last conversation. "Construction continues on 17 worlds, preparing infrastructure for something much larger than consciousness integration." Both men retained perfect memory of Tom Blackwood's final sacrifice, including the precise technical specifications he'd obtained through temporary integration with the alien collective. Before Holbrook's condition deteriorated completely, he managed to transmit those frequency calculations to every military installation and research facility capable of generating harmonic resonance fields. The response was immediate and global. Within 72 hours, coordinated harmonic bombardment began targeting dimensional weak points detected by deep space monitoring stations worldwide. Beijing, Kourou, and 3 previously unknown facilities in Antarctica, Chile, and northern Canada all experienced simultaneous quantum field collapses. The alien vessel's reaction was notable. Instead of continuing its approach toward Earth, the massive artificial star altered course, moving toward the outer solar system where it established orbital position near Pluto. Long-range telescopic observations revealed construction activity on an unprecedented scale. The deployment of structures that dwarfed Jupiter in size, geometric configurations that suggested preparation for something far beyond simple planetary harvesting. That was 18 months ago. Yesterday, the Hubble Space Telescope captured images that made NASA classify the entire project above presidential security clearance. The alien vessel had begun constructing what appeared to be a massive geometric framework around Pluto itself, transforming the dwarf planet into some kind of dimensional anchor point. More disturbing were the energy readings. The construction process was generating quantum field resonances that propagated throughout the solar system, creating standing wave patterns that suggested the framework was designed to function as a massive amplification system for dimensional bridge technology. They weren't just building a staging ground for Earth's conquest. They were constructing infrastructure to support dimensional bridges spanning the entire galaxy, using our solar system as the central hub for universal consciousness integration. Tom Blackwood's sacrifice had delayed their immediate plans but hadn't changed their ultimate objective. If anything, humanity's resistance had convinced them that more thorough preparation was necessary. I still visit the crater where Greenbank Observatory once stood. Local electromagnetic interference makes electronic equipment malfunction within a 5-mile radius, but sometimes, when atmospheric conditions align properly, you can hear something that resembles Tom's voice carried on radio frequencies that shouldn't exist. He's still calculating, still trying to find mathematical solutions to problems that exist beyond human comprehension. The alien framework around Pluto reaches completion in approximately 4 months. Tom's voice grows stronger each night, calling across impossible distances with equations that hurt to understand.